welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So why don't you introduce yourselves to everybody?
My name's Jeff DeLoff. I'm originally from Oswego, New York. Went to the CIA. Just got started into cooking pretty much like everyone else does.
Yeah.
Started as a dishwasher. Became too annoying to the cooks on the other side of the kitchen. So they were like, do you want to come work over here? And I said yes. And that's quite literally the end of it.
That's funny.
It's the beginning of the story. And that's where it's led me today. And that was like 15.
Wow.
Yesterday was my 37th birthday. So
Wow. Happy birthday.
it's been a long journey thus far. But I've been up and down the East Coast. I worked in Syracuse for a little bit. I worked in Virginia for a good portion.
Okay.
Roanoke and Charlottesville and in those areas. And then I spent a lot of time as a kid in Fredericksburg.
Okay.
So
Cool.
Virginia's always been a second home for me. And then I moved back up here right during COVID in 2020. So
Fun time to live in Syracuse.
yeah, or anywhere for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. Bob, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Bob Leonard. Grew up in Iowa. Never heard of Syracuse. Went to graduate school at the University of Tennessee. Dropped out during a PhD program to work in wine restaurants. Worked at some of the best fine dining restaurants in Appalachia, North Carolina. And then post-COVID, looking for a change of pace, but still wanting to do wine. But it was really risky moving to a larger market like New York City or Chicago or San Francisco. I was looking at all those places. But I came up here to take a job that, was really good for me at the time. And, and I was going to leave when I left that position and go to New York City. But I saw a lot of opportunity here in Syracuse to really add a lot of value and not really step on any toes, but just to add to what's already here.
Yeah.
So I opened up Nobody's Wine Bar, which we're coming up on 1 year there with my partner, John LaSala. And then Jeff and I and a group of supporters of us are in the process of getting ready to open up Touché, which is going to be the first French bistro in a while in Syracuse. We're looking forward to it.
That's awesome. I forget, have we talked about the Iowa thing before?
I don't know if we have or not.
What part of Iowa are you from?
So I grew up in southeast Iowa. I was raised with my grandparents about 8 miles from the Missouri border.
Okay.
Super small town called West Grove. Actually, technically, it's not a town because there's no post office, so it's not incorporated, right on the highway. And then I kind of just grew up all over there in southeast Iowa, kind of wedged in between Des Moines and Iowa City.
Yeah.
Are usually the reference points that people have.
Yeah. So my in-laws are from Baxter.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, my grandmother is in town. My wife's grandmother is in town right now. And actually, so is her aunt and all them. Anyways, they're all from Baxter. They're all in town visiting. But my in-laws all live up in Boonville today. So
yeah, that's awesome. No, I went back to Iowa for the first time in 7 years, a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah. It looks exactly the same, hills and corn, which I missed a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
I missed a lot of the food, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what? I'm curious because I've had some of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's a couple things you can't get outside of Iowa. One's breaded pork tenderloins. Mm-hmm. So this is just, pork tenderloin slices that are pounded incredibly thin. That's like the size of your face, if not bigger, on like what looks like the smallest potato roll in the world.
Yeah.
But it's just so good. Pork burgers, gas station pizza, there's just something about... the best food in Iowa are the truck stops.
Yeah. Were you a handball family?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely a handball family. And it's funny, you don't realize that these things are like regionally specific until you like leave for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy cow. And I'm talking to people that I know now who've always been on the East Coast about, it's like,
Snickers salad.
I haven't had a handball in forever. People are like, the world's a handball, and
I never knew that ham salad was a thing until I was like in my early 20s. And I just remember thinking it's ham and mayonnaise chopped up. So it's just like a ham and mayonnaise sandwich. Why would you call it a specific ham salad thing? And then I went to Iowa for the first time 2 or 3 years ago, I think. And with my wife, we were there for a week to visit. And, I had handballs for the first time and thought it was one of the most disgusting things I've ever had in my life. I just could not get over it. And I think my wife's there's a varying recipe between my mother-in-law and my father-in-law's family, and I think it's my father-in-law's family that uses graham crackers as the binder, and I think my mother-in-law's family uses saltines as the binder. Maybe I forget which.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's a taste of nostalgia, So
I don't know. I couldn't get past it, and I had like a couple bites. I was like, this is not for me at all. And then loose meat sandwiches, which is basically steamed hamburger. Have you ever been out to Skinellis and Skinny Atlas, like the drive-in? It's similar.
I haven't.
It's a ice cream stand, walk-up window. They do food, and they've got like a small little seating area, like indoor seating area. But they're like some people go crazy for them. It's called a Skinellis burger. It's basically like granuled steamed hamburger that they can get covered in like 2 slices of white American cheese and then piled up on a hamburger bun.
Yeah, well, they say the sloppy Joe was invented in Iowa. So,
Really?
Yeah.
I could see that. Although
I would much rather have the sloppy joes than what you just described from Skinny Atlas.
the loose meat sandwich is essentially the same thing. It's like steamed granuled burger meat that gets piled. They serve it with a soup spoon. You order a loose meat sandwich, they serve it with a soup spoon. And, it was just like, okay. But the one thing I found, I don't know, I mean, you grew up there, so maybe you can correct, you can save the Iowan delicacies for me in my mind. Nothing was seasoned. There was no there was no garlic or salt or anything like that.
I would agree with that. The food I feel like is very not under seasoned, but yeah, I mean, having experienced the life that I've experienced since leaving, I would notice that maybe a little bit more, if you get all the flavor in food from Iowa from the Busch Light you drink it with.
Right.
So,
yeah. Sure.
That's the real delicacy of Iowa.
Yeah, it is. I drank a lot of Busch Light out there, and it does taste like it should. Yeah. It tastes like it should.
We're gonna have not similar, but we are gonna have kind of embracing that kind of countryside, but French cuisine over at Touché. So it's gonna be tons of flavor, but it's gonna be that really kind of homey, feel good kind of style of food too.
I will just say the last thing that you having Busch Light at Nobody's now makes a hell of a lot of sense, because I think up until I've mentioned to some people, you were like, yeah, I've got a couple of guys that come in and will just clean me out of Busch Light in a night. And I've said that people are like, why is nobody selling Busch Light? Now it makes complete sense.
It's nostalgic for me. I have to have one cheap beer, like one domestic beer.
Yeah.
Nobody, to my knowledge, I ask all the time, like I can't find another spot in Armory or downtown Syracuse that sells Busch Light, and there's clearly a market for it.
For sure.
And during happy hour, it's only $2.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly cheap. Yeah.
It's,
Busch Light.
We have something
Makes
for
sense.
everyone.
Yeah.
This
is the important part about a podcast. I now get to know the story, the backstory of why the $2 Busch Lights.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. So you just referenced it, but, tell everybody. So there's Nobody's. You've been doing pierogies there on Tuesday nights? Thursday nights. And you're making the pierogies?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I make the dough, and all the fillings are generally different. I don't think I've had anything repeat on purpose. I think I might have done just kind of like a stock sale, if you will, of ones that didn't, fully sell the first time or something like that. But I try to make them all different and unique with either stuff that I find at the market or just
that's cool.
Like this coming week, we're gonna have hot dog pierogi.
Oh, really?
And it's just gonna be like, I don't know. I'm sure of Rudy's in Oswego. That'll have a little reference to Rudy's with the Texas Hots, and
nice.
And then the other one's going to be like a burrata and summer tomato.
Oh, cool.
So I try to keep them pretty unique.
I felt like, was it 2 weeks ago? It was like a little sweet. There was one that was sweet, right?
Yeah, I've done a few sweet ones in the past. Yeah.
And then this past week, it was like more like there was one with potato, right? It was like a little more hearty.
Yeah. Few times now I've done like 3 different kinds, one of them being a completely sweet dessert oriented one, but I just try to change it up and make it fun, mostly for myself, not necessarily for anyone else, but so it's different for myself.
That's a whole podcast we could have just from that about the food industry. Yeah, but all right, so you've both been at Nobody's, and tell me about Touché.
Bob and I both worked at St. Urban.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we met each other. And then subsequently, when he was opening Nobody's, he reached out to me and, wanted to express this idea that he was doing, and whether or not we could figure out a food portion of it. And, lo and behold, Nobody's opened. It wasn't really a need for a strong food presence, let alone a need for myself to be there.
Yeah.
And then we kind of got this opportunity at a space in Armory Square. And then it just kind of really, we sat down one evening and it was like, that was it. All we needed was just one evening to kind of like branch out an idea. And then we kind of just ran with it. And the more people we talked to about it, the more express of interest that people had.
That's cool.
And I think it just kind of snowballed on itself.
That's awesome.
The general idea is it's a French bistro.
Okay.
But it's focused on whole animal butchery. So we'll do whole or half animals. We have a full butcher shop in the basement because the space does have two floors to it.
Okay.
The first floor being the actual dining space. And then the basement side itself has the same square footage as the first floor.
Gotcha.
And so, the bandsaw, butcher tables, a whole dedicated walk-in to those types of things. And the menu will be based on that. So it'll be a huge
cool.
focus on, trying to use an entire animal and kind of bring in a lot of these French classics. But because Bob and myself have kind of Southern and Appalachian backgrounds, and it mirrors a lot of what you would find in the French countryside, we're going to kind of mold those together and really take influence from what New York State has to offer.
That's awesome.
Because they're all parallel in one way or another, whether it's geographically on a longitudinal line or, it just kind of molds and fits, especially with the philosophy that the wine program is going to have and the spirit program will have. It'll just kind of fold into the food as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. It was a lot of that stuff there in the basement before you got into the space?
It was empty.
Oh, okay.
It was really,
Yeah.
that space was empty. And we did pretty much a full gut and remodel.
Wow.
Down to the floors, we really wanted to make that space.
Yeah.
We really want to make that space our own. And it's like sometimes you walk into it can be a really great restaurant that opens up in a space that used to be something else at one point. And if you really don't put in the effort and the capital to like transform that space, like it just feels,
You get stuck.
it feels weird. When you go into like an Asian restaurant that used to be like a lobster boil or something, and it's just like, this kind of feels, so we wanted to make sure that the space was truly our own, take some liberties to make us, we're going to be there so many hours of every day. So kind of like with Nobody, it was a complete empty case. And it's just like, I'm going to be spending 100 hours a week here. I want to feel happy in this space. I want it to look how I want it to look. And
Yeah, you referenced in the stoop like before the podcast. I was like, yeah, that's the old stoop space, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Correct, yeah.
I never went in there when it was the stoop. I just never had the opportunity, and then yada yada yada. But I mean, it housed like one of the best bakers that I think Syracuse has ever seen before, with Yemen when he was here.
That's what I heard. I was not in New York when the
Yeah.
stoop was open, so I kind of followed it from afar
Yeah.
and saw that it's iteration of
Yeah.
opening and then being open and then not being open.
Yeah.
And then subsequently, I could never imagine where it was because I didn't grow up in Syracuse. So
Yeah.
Armory Square was, the 40 miles away that
Right.
Syracuse is from Oswego. So I never really correlated with it of where it was in that area. So when we introduced the space, I was like, I see the sign says stoop, but I don't know. I kind of remember it. And then there was like the Scratch Bakery was in there.
Yeah.
Something to that
I
extent.
think there was a
in there.
pizza shop way back in the day too.
Well,
Everyone
yes.
keeps on talking about.
Yeah, it was a pizza shop back in the I think late '80s and '90s. Was it called Slices? It was called Slices.
That sounds right.
Yeah. I'd never been there. I'm pretty sure Eric Alderman owned that also. And then, and then it was the stoop, I think, back in the day also. Like he had the stoop, and then it was empty forever. He reopened it as the stoop. The opening chef he had in there was like one of the worst people that's ever existed in the universe, and did so much damage on the food scene here in Syracuse. But then there was Yemen, who was like the best baker that Syracuse has ever seen. One of the stories was that like he didn't like the chef so much that he refused to allow her to use his bread in the restaurant.
That's a lot of animosity.
Yeah, so he would bake for the Scratch Bakehouse or the Stoop Bakery on the main floor. And then, but yeah, she was not allowed to use his bread in the restaurant. So
Crazy.
Yeah, and I think he went from the stoop to eventually he landed. He was like overseeing like Starbucks and like Japan's pastry program or something crazy like that. But yeah, he was really, really, really talented and made some incredible stuff out of there.
Well, that's something that we've realized. I've really realized the longer I'm in Syracuse is that there's an incredible, especially when it comes to food and beverages, so many like incredibly talented people that are just like hanging out and around. Deserve really awesome spaces to be able to express themselves. I'm amazed every time when I get somebody walking the Nobodies and they're like, yeah, I came up here because my partner got a really good job and now I'm just, I'm doing this, but I worked at like, a Michelin restaurant in New York City for a handful of years, or, I worked at this resort in Aspen. And, I'm just, there's a lot of talent here. And so, to be able to try to help build spaces to engage with some of that, I think is something important and something that we're really trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, whole animal butchery is very exciting. And I mean, obviously bringing a French bistro back to Syracuse is very exciting because I don't think we've had one since the 90s, at least, not in like Syracuse proper. So what do you what's going to be so different about the restaurant from like what we have now? As dumb of a question as that is.
That's not a dumb question. I think it's a very valuable question because something that I have stressed and I've really focused on my career for the past, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it was when I was down in Virginia was the reliance on big box beef and like all of these large retail distributors that kind of their sole purpose is to literally peddle you food, whether it's pre-made products, whether it's something special or it's pre-marinated or pre-cooked or, whatever buzzwords they might be featuring at any given time.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like a spark, and ever since then, like my entire mindset has changed. And I was in a restaurant in Charlottesville, and I started working with this one individual farm, and the guy was excellent. He raised cattle. He went to Harvard. He went to Yale. Wow. He had a big tech company and then sold it and moved back to his hometown in Wolftown, Virginia, which is literally just a street called Wolftown Road. And I bought short ribs and like eye around from him or something like that. And it was like the first time I ever talked to him in person. So he came in with this little like rolly cooler and we're just kind of briefly discussing. And I asked him like how his business was and like how much outreach he has. And he said, well, 90% of my business is straight retail.
Wow.
And the rest of it, 10%, I kind of reserve for wholesale. And then he's like, but I got to say, I hate working with restaurants. And I was like, okay, cool, great introduction here. And he's like, the biggest problem that I have with it is that chefs only want like 2 or 3 things.
Yeah.
And they want them to be exactly the same. And that's just not how this business works. It's not how animal husbandry works. I can't just always reserve ribeyes and sirloins and tenderloins. And here I am like, oh, here's my small order of 2 specific things that I asked for. And the more that we talked about it, and I was like, okay, then the next time I order from you, I want a half. And then I'll figure out what to do with it from there.
Wow.
So it kind of really reinvented the way that I approach food and the way that I kind of come up with things. So rather than me just being like, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this, now it's more like, what is there to be offered? And like if I bring in a whole or half a steer, you're kind of forcing yourself to be creative and you're forcing yourself to think outside the normal realms of like, here's a list of things and I want this and I want that. So, you have to be really smart.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of money up front because it's a large amount, but price per pound is so much lower that you're able to offer some of these exquisite cuts of meat that you wouldn't normally see. Or if you did, they would be so expensive that you would never think about it at a fair price for people. And you're simultaneously educating people that there's more than just a strip loin and a ribeye and a tenderloin, and there's so many great cuts of beef or pork or lamb or whatever animal it might be.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to be bringing to the literal table at this point, is that we're kind of forcing the market to bend at our will at that aspect. So it kind of gives this exclusivity and this limited time frame. And I could be like, oh, we're getting beef delivery on Thursday. If you want something specific, you should probably come in sooner than later because there's a good chance that, I can only get maybe a dozen ribeye steaks if you cut them at 3/4 of an inch. So that's all I got.
Yeah.
There's only one, rib primal on a cow. So now we got to move on to a different steak and kind of open up and simultaneously work it to our advantage and obviously to the community's advantage.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when you were saying it, like, how does that affect your logistics and planning for your menu? Of knowing that, like, hey, I've got a limited amount of these things, and it's not like I can just get another cow tomorrow. Does that excite you, or does that sort of terrify you?
Oh, it's exciting.
Yeah.
I think, having do it in a place like Charlottesville that is very progressive in their food front. They had a food hub that had been in existence for a good 10 years, and the amount of local farms and the sheer bounty of the Shenandoah Valley is like readily available at your fingertips. And while I was down there, I was like, why isn't anyone? It's all in front of you. Like, this is so easy to just be like, oh, I can go talk to this person or pick it up on my way in. And then I remember specifically thinking, like, there's no reason why it's not done in New York. And then if you do your research when it comes to New York as a state, especially in this area alone, there's like somewhere around 8,000 acres of organic soil that is predominantly just used for food. Yeah. If you look at all of these restaurants in New York City and Michelin restaurants in New York City, they buy from this area. Yeah. And then it gets taken to New York City. Norwich Meadows in Norwich, New York is a huge example of this. Yeah. And that's only 35 minutes from here. So it's exciting to me because it might sound limiting on paper, but it's not. I mean, your expectations are so much higher in yourself, and it kind of forces you to be smart about it. Yeah. And I find that a little more exciting than just looking at a catalog and being like, well, let's just do this week. Like, no, let's use this product and make it something more than just like, oh, it's ground beef. Like, well, it can be a lot more than ground beef. It can be numerous different things, or these different individual cuts on out of the shoulder, out of beef. It's like there's, a dozen that you don't readily find at the supermarket or at a local butcher because there isn't that many around here, and most of them, and I'm not to drag anyone through the mud in that aspect, but they're doing, what these large companies have kind of forced them to do, and that's just order boxes of it, and you open it up, and then you cut steaks out of it. Yeah. So I find it exciting, and from everyone that we've talked to about it, seems to agree. I hope they agree with me in that aspect too, that it's something interesting and unique that isn't necessarily in this area to that extent. Yeah.
It's not in the area. I mean, the only person that I know in Syracuse that is getting consistently local products, not just protein, but just local in general, and that's Eden. I just had Derek in this morning, and we were talking about that. And I don't know of anybody else that's currently. I mean, I'm sure there's people that source some stuff locally, but not on a large scale. I mean, even like 11 Waters in the Hotel Syracuse, like they just had a write-up a few weeks ago or a month ago from Syracuse.com about, I think it was Jacob Pucci or Jared Paventi. One of them went to dinner there, and it was like, I just wish there was more Finger Lakes represented items on the menu because there's like none, and that started out as a restaurant that was supposed to be 100% Finger Lakes region driven food and wine. And then over the last 5 or 6 years that they've been open, they've just gotten down to like hardly any representation. But we live in such an area. Derek and I were talking about just like regional foods, like if I think about like what foods is Buffalo known for, what foods is Rochester or Binghamton or Utica or anything like that. What are they all known for versus Syracuse? What is Syracuse known for? And not much compared to, the others. I mean, it's hard to compare salt potatoes to Rochester's meat sauce, but we are Central New York, and we're in such close proximity to so many amazing farms and wineries and just interesting things that are people doing with agriculture. I don't know if we do have to like have to have our own thing if we just pull from all the other great shit that's around us.
No, I don't. I think the notoriety of like having your city or town be known for something specifically as as minuscule as salt potatoes might sound, but
Salt potatoes are cool.
there's a depth of history
For sure.
that on paper or at face value doesn't sound like a lot, but once you really start to look into it, like this is pretty cool when you think about it. Especially Syracuse Salt Company is a prime example of this because it's salt water,
Right.
and below freshwater, like because this area is carved out by glaciers. Like there's all of these things, and talking about history and like this area is known for its history, whether it is something like the Erie Canal or whether it is the War of 1812. Like being from Oswego, like it's a thing that I always have known and grew up with because there's so much actual American history that has happened there. There's no reason that food is not the same because the state is notoriously known for upstate feeding the downstate.
Yeah.
And that it's been there forever.
That's interesting to put it that way. Yeah. I love diving into, I was just in Buffalo on Friday, and like every restaurant that I went to was like the originator of whatever that dish was in Buffalo's history. Whether it was like Bocce Club for, something as simple as Buffalo style pizza, or the Anchor Bar for like being the first restaurant to really sell chicken wings, or Schwabbles for the beef on weck. Even though like all of those, like those three examples, especially to locals in Buffalo, they wouldn't say that they're the best of that thing that they created. It's still really interesting just to be connected to the history and like go into Schwabbles and be like, or Anchor Bar, hey, I'm in the first restaurant that ever, started producing this thing. Is pretty interesting. So, yeah. So where do you go to get your beef?
I have a few different sources. Predominantly the one I'll be using is Rosencrantz. They're at the tip of Seneca Lake.
Okay.
In Seneca Falls. And I found them through Finger Lakes Farms, which they're also based at Seneca Falls, and they're a regional distributor, a small regional distributor, and the majority of their product comes from this area.
That's cool.
And they'll pick up beef from him, or their processing facility, I do believe, is in Rochester.
Okay.
So I'll predominantly be getting the beef from there, but I'm open to anyone or anywhere that might raise cattle. And obviously there's some caveats that I have to kind of follow in terms of a health perspective and USDA facilities and whatnot. But there's not really anyone that I'm going to be sold to 100%. I think a lot of people predominantly grow Black Angus or raise Black Angus, but that doesn't mean that that's not the only thing that's out there. I live in north of Central Square, and right down the road from me, someone raises Highland cattle or Scottish Highland cattle. And, there is no limit to what I won't talk to. So
What's I think they call it I think they say they're a Wagyu farm out in Cazenovia. Yeah, I know there's them. There's Tilden Hill Farms and out in like Rome area. I think he's raising Black Angus though. But it is interesting to hear, like I've talked to some of those small, like 20, 30, head farms, and they've often tried to go to like a big burger joint in Syracuse to try and like sell. And they're like, oh, I just can't produce enough for you because all you want, like you were saying earlier, is just hamburger,
correct,
or just ground beef. And so I think it's a completely different world for those farmers when you're like, hey, I'm going to take one entire cow, please, and then we'll talk in a couple weeks or however long it's going to take you.
Which is what my general philosophy is. Like I've worked with lots of farmers just in general too, and then their main thing is like, well, I only produce X amount. And I was like, I don't really care what it looks like. You can give me tomato seconds. You can give me produce that you deem is not suitable to be sold to other people. And it's like, it's not, my job is to literally transform food into something, quote unquote, that is edible for people. So I don't really care what it looks like, or if there's, bruised or blistered tomatoes, or the fruit doesn't look nice, or it's got dark spots. Like I'll figure out what to do with it. The avenue that chefs play, and I won't go on such a long tangent about this because I could literally speak hours about it, is to transform food. That's my sole job is to just take one thing and turn it into something else, and obviously make money doing it.
Yeah.
But it's about supporting everyone else that's in the community with this, and that's how restaurants started. They started as taverns. Like the hospitality is to take care of people, which I think you had someone on your podcast go through the whole same ringaround and the explanation of that about that. But food has always been a staple and it's a necessity to have. And it's just gotten to the point where you can go anywhere and get whatever you want at any given time without really any thought to what that has on an impact in your local community.
Yeah.
So, if you raise 2 heads of cattle or you only raise 3 pigs at a time, then reach out. Let's talk. Like if you only have one and the next one is 6 months down the road or a year down the road, so what? Like I'll use it. I'll use that one to help you, and it helps me, and then it helps everyone else. And that's kind of like the main driving force for the food at Touché is to really represent that and to really kind of be a hub, not only for people to come and eat, but a hub for people who dedicate their lives to raising livestock or produce or wheat or corn or whatever it might be to come and sell their product to us to kind of be part of Syracuse, part of the community, part of everything else with it.
So where did you develop, or when did you develop like this sort of approach to food, or even just like desire to pursue local? Because I'm obviously not as familiar with like the Oswego food scene as you would be, having lived there, and you've obviously like you said, you've traveled and down in the Carolinas and Virginia, and you'd been in food since you were 15. But what were your examples of other restaurants that were doing this?
I hate to say, I watched Chef's Table through Netflix. Seeing Dan Barber's excellent example of like if you had unlimited funds, how would you make this work? And I think that's the biggest complaint or the biggest argument that I would have talking to small scale farmers, and being that as an example. They're like, well, of course it works for him, or of course it works for them because they have such an unlimited amount of funds to kind of do this.
His Klaus, I don't know if you read the third plate for me. So when he's like referencing Klaus Martins, it was like had just finished the book, and like a week later I was at a private dinner actually at 11 Waters when Cody Dedishu was there, and he like brings out the bread course. He's like, and this is flour that I milled with grain I got from Klaus Martins in Penyan. I was like, how the fuck do you know about that?
I don't think it's that hard to look into it, and it's not hard to find. It's here.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's a very specific moment. I can honestly say it did not come from the growing up in Oswego. Like I was probably one of the most pickiest eaters growing up.
Okay.
And obviously the food scene in Oswego has progressively gotten so much better than when I was a kid, because predominantly it was bars. There's still bars in Oswego, but not as many. Maybe not as many as it was when I was a kid. But it really didn't start until I was in Virginia. And I think I remember taking a trip to Fredericksburg just on a whim, and just walking through the farmers market that they had like every day in downtown Fredericksburg, and I was like, "Wow, okay, cool. This is phenomenal." And there's one in Oswego, and it's very small, and it's changed over the years. It was predominantly food, and now it's a lot of small wares and specialty things. And then I just kind of like, let me research into this. And people who know me closely also know that I am very obsessive when it comes to like a topic. Like that's all I just focus on that for like months and months and months and months and months. Cool. And then I'll find another one and do the same exact thing. And then this one has been something that I've held on to for so long that no matter where I go and no matter what food they're doing or what their business model is, I try to at least fold a little bit into it, because it's still a skill that I learned. I taught myself how to butcher whole animals. I did that on my own.
That's cool.
Having to go into the CIA, they touch upon on so little. At least it was when I was there, because that's not predominantly how food is sold anymore. And then I literally just worked my way up from that. I worked with a small, the they're not really small, but small for this case. Pig farmer. They raise hogs. They raise Berkshire, and then they also raise Ossibao, which is a kind of heritage breed pig out of the Ossibao Islands in the Carolinas, and they were left there by the Spaniards so long ago, and they developed dwarfism. They're a direct descendant to the black pig of Spain's. But they raise these pigs out in a natural environment. They're allowed them to fire on their own. They're literally just wild pigs that they keep in a loosely pen, for that matter. And I started working with them, and then the more I researched into it, and the more, I read The Third Plate, I read Songs of the Blue Ocean. Like, I read all of these books that are all dedicated to just regenerative agriculture and sustainability and all this other stuff. And I was like, this is not really hard to find.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work on yourself as a chef to do that, because it's not just like, oh, and I'm just opening a package of something and you can just throw it on a grill. There's a lot of thought process that goes to that point where it even goes into a kitchen on a hotline or in the middle of service. And I think all of that dedication that goes into it has like just sunk its roots into me, pun intended for that matter, that I can't really shake it. And it completely changed my philosophy when it comes to food in general.
That's interesting. It's very interesting. It's really exciting to hear you say that, as somebody who's like, to hear you guys talk about this, and even just for me to like go into Nobody's with, and be able to do that little wine class with you. It's incredibly inspiring for someone like myself who's incredibly judgmental of our food scene in Syracuse. And critical, and to a fault, not to like, that's not like a badge of honor that I should wear, even though I do. But it's exciting to hear just, the little bit about this. I can't wait to experience it because, in my opinion, it's like, I know I've said this a lot in the past few episodes, but at one point, Syracuse had like 4 incredible restaurants, all open, 5, all open at the same time prior to COVID, that were just really, really, really great restaurants that I would put up against anything else I've seen that I've been to around New York State. And, as it stands right now, we have 1, that's open until you all open up. Then we'll have 2, So it's very exciting to hear about it. Yeah. Is it hard to balance, as people who have like an invested stake in the success of a restaurant, is it hard to balance the like entertainment sort of advertising approach to also like the incredible passion for high quality and local products like this? Like, is there sort of like a duality in like your mindset of like, all right, I'm incredibly passionate about hyper local foods and these incredible farms and agriculture and animals that we're going to be bringing in and whole animal butchery and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, I have to find some way to make it attractive and get people in here.
I remember I had a very, very dear friend tell me the other week. She was like, one of the things I like the most about you, I also really kind of hate sometimes, is how much of a purist you are. And I've sat with that for a couple weeks actually. And I was like, you know what, there is something to be said for that, because that's been really one of the struggles at Nobody's is, I want to be very pure to what I stand for, the values that I stand for, both in terms of hospitality, both in terms of the wines that I'm selecting, the wines that I'm serving. But then there's also something to be said about having, in order to be successful and succeed in this industry, especially in this market, there has to be some sort of reciprocal relationship and respect for the guest as well. And I've really, have come around and we've started to, change up a few things at Nobody's based off of just what people really want, or things that I was like really kind of adamant about not pouring by the glass, starting to find examples that I can feel comfortable pouring by the glass, but something that also people really, really want.
You brought in Red Cat?
I have not brought in Red Cat yet. No. Maybe during State Fair time we'll find some. We'll find our own Red Cat equivalent. That being said, though, I think one of the sleepers in the Finger Lakes is Hazlitt. You walk into Hazlitt, I think you go to the right, and that's where like the Red Cat and all the slushies are. And then you go to the left, and they have a counter that's never busy. That's where all their vinifera wines are. And by Vitis vinifera, it's the species of grape that is most of the grapes that we use to make wine. So if you think of like Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, the species of those grapes are all Vitis vinifera. And Hazlitt has some of the access to some of the oldest, best vineyards in the Finger Lakes to make these wines like Chardonnay, to make dry Rieslings, to make Cab, and so forth. And they're honestly some of the best wines in the Finger Lakes. And you just, and you just don't know. But I think that's kind of actually a really kind of brilliant example of they say very, 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 very pure. They make the best possible examples of some of these like very normal wines. But in order to justify doing that and to still pay all of their staff,
they have to make Red Cat.
they don't have to, but it worked for them.
Yeah,
it was something that they found. It's just like everyone wanted Moscato at Nobody's, and I was like, I can bring in good Moscato, but I really don't want to for the longest time. And then I was like, well, you know what? No, there's actually some like really great Moscatos or some like kind of regional Moscato-esque things in the Finger Lakes. And started pouring some of that by the glass. And, I've come a long ways like, actually, I really love drinking this on my own, after work. And guests have really, kind of taken to it. And so, I do think that there's just this, you just have to really think about, the battles and the hills that you want to die on.
Yeah.
And then have just a little bit of flexibility for a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But as long as you don't compromise your values, and I know, Jeff, there won't be big box beef at Touché.
No, there won't.
We might go vegetarian before we go big box beef, but
I had a conversation with a food rep a year or so ago, and he was telling me about this incredibly inexpensive new cut of beef that was out on the market, and it's injected with fat to make it look attractive. And
yes,
so
this is not a new It's not a new invention, but yes.
And he was like golf courses are buying it like crazy. I was like, that sounds awful. I do not want to eat that. Do you want more, Perry?
I won't say no. Okay. That's actually very good.
I'm gonna grab like that. I actually bought 2 bottles of grape juice I was gonna bring in for you, and I completely left them at home. I realized that as you were just talking about.
Welch's grape juice?
That winery. I was out on Seneca 2 weeks ago. I went out to Spotted Duck.
Oh, I love Spotted Duck.
Yeah.
That's such a cool. Do you see the peacock? Do you have the peacock out there?
It wasn't out when I was there.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
But I've been meaning to go there for a while, and
It wasn't Fulkerson, was it? Where you got the grape juice from, or?
I think it was them, but I bought that actually at Chateauburn Farms.
Okay.
Because they had it, but it was a bottle of Riesling juice and then Concord juice, which, I know everybody's had Concord juice, but the Riesling I'd never seen before, and I was like, I wonder if Bob would like that.
I know. No, it's so fun. I got introduced to that stuff over at FLX Provisions in Geneva, and I think it's such a fun idea. We don't see a lot of it because when you can press those grapes into juice, and you can only sell grape juice for so much money when you can make it into a wine and sell it for a lot more money.
Yeah.
Because vinifera grapes are, especially Riesling in the Finger Lakes, it's incredibly expensive by the ton. But it's fun. I've always thought about trying to bring something like that into Nobody's to do a fun little because I don't think people really think about it, or doing. I think when Keenan was over at Eden, if I'm not mistaken, I think they did do a couple Finger Lakes grape juices and some cocktails. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Oh wait, you guys are doing the dinner with us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know about that?
We've talked about it. We've talked about it.
This is the one where it's coming to mind. Then yes.
You looked a little surprised.
Rich is like has said he's still working out the details.
Yes.
But we've
been approached to do like many different dinners at this point. So I'm just like, which one are we talking? Which one are we talking about here?
I mean,
yes.
I don't think he's officially announced it, but by the time who cares? Yes, the plan is the weekend after Labor Day, an all-white party outside in front of Eden, big long table, and then 12 courses, I believe, roughly six different chefs, each taking 2 courses, and then you're doing the wine pairings with it, correct?
Yeah.
So that'll be really exciting.
That was an easy yes.
It was absolutely,
It was a very easy yes.
He called me after listening to the podcast with Kevin Gentili and Sean Gates, and he was like, I've got an idea. What if we did this? I was like, that sounds fucking awesome. So I think, as far as I know, I don't know if Kevin can do it, but I think Sean is in, Derek and Rich are in, you are in. I think Eva is in, I'm assuming Eva from Eva's, and I think Alex and Lauren might be flying in from North Carolina to do a course with Noah. So Alex and Lauren from Amano. And I don't know who else. I know he was reaching out to a bunch of people, but yeah, that's going to be incredible.
No, when he reached out to us about it, I thought it was super, super cool, super exciting.
Yeah.
And, hopefully it's the first of many things like that in Syracuse.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Do you know Mark Paulo from Plum and Mule Community Market?
I do.
Okay. So Mark, when it was Farm to Fork 101, he used to do those dinners all the time.
And I was living in Virginia at the time when I followed Eden's iteration and its creation because when they first started doing their announcements and talking about where they were ordering from, I knew
that's cool
predominantly everyone that they were already ordering from. So I'd always followed their that restaurant, and then that's when they started doing the Farm to Fork 101, and I reached out to them immediately. Yeah. And I was like, even though that I don't live in Central New York anymore, I do know, where you are and where you're coming from, and it's really exciting and it's very cool. So when I moved back up here, that's when they were doing the fresh Eden.
Yeah, Eden Fresh.
Yeah, and then I was ordering from them when I worked at a winery in Baldwinsville, Strigo Vineyards.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was a part of that when they first opened up.
That's cool.
So I reached out to Mark and was talking to him then, and you know, I was super excited that they met their kind of charity goals that they're doing for the plum market, and I thought that was really cool. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. I was just
really opening up.
I was on the phone with him last week. I'm hoping, I know he's not going to do them nearly as consistently as he used to, but I think he's going to try and pick up and do like one or two maybe. I don't know when. I want to follow up with him because I want to do them, or not, as a regular thing. Nobody really makes money off of them, which is fine because I think they're just important to have something like that in the food scene.
Agreed.
And so I hope that hopefully they kick off at least one by the end of the year. I think would be really, really cool. Like a fall harvest one or something. Maybe at Touché.
We're open to a lot of things. Yeah.
I'm just I'm at the point now, there's so many people that have popped up recently or over the last year, I should say. And I'm sure there's like you were saying, there's so many more people that I don't even know that are in the area that know what they're talking about when it comes to food or beverages. That are probably, Caleb's a great example. Caleb was tucked away at Arid Evans Inn from Hermit's, and Caleb's incredibly talented, and now he's got his own food truck doing his thing. But I think it's hopefully they're popping back out of the woodwork, and some of these very talented and knowledgeable people to start doing some of their own stuff. But I think it's important to try and create a group of all of them, and keep them all connected. I was thinking I'm going to start doing not consistently or hey, it's every Tuesday or anything like that. Maybe it's every other month or something. Just trying and inviting people here on a Tuesday night or a Monday night and try and get 10 or 12 people together that are talented in the industry, come here, drink, hang out, meet each other, see what cool shit happens.
Potluck.
Yeah.
Food
I'll be
would
here
cool
for a
too,
chef-driven potluck. 1000%.
That would be pretty fun, yeah. All right, so Derek was in here earlier and asked me this question, and I'm going to ask the two of you, and you can fight over who gets the answer first. What do you think makes up we'll use the word good, but really a great food scene in an area?
Go ahead. You can answer this first.
Oh. That's hard. It's not an easy question, you know, because there's a level of subjectivity to what good means.
Let's say
I think diverse. Oh, go ahead.
we could say like well-rounded.
Yeah. I mean, I think diversity is important. I think just the general vibe of the area. I think about this a lot. I think the general vibe of the area has to be something that's willing to attract and draw in tons of people. The amount of people every day that come into Nobody's, and they're from Baldwinsville or Manlius, Cazenovia, Skinny Atlas, Liverpool, Cicero. They're like, I would be here every day if you were in Baldwinsville or if you're in Manlius, if you're in Liverpool. And I kind of think about this and I'm like, well, this is Syracuse. It takes you 2 minutes or 15 minutes to get anywhere.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's 1 mile away or 10 miles away. It takes you 2 or 15 minutes. So I've been thinking about that a lot. I was like, okay, so you would come here every day if this was closer to you. So what can we do to make this whole general area just more inviting and more exciting for you to want to come down to?
Yeah.
And I think, people get excited about new things. People get excited about a lot of energy. And I think we're starting to see that more and more in Armory Square.
That's good.
There's more places opening up, trying to open up. Some of those storefronts that have been closed for a long time are now getting leased. And so I feel excited about the general direction. There seems to be good energy coming downtown. I think that gets people excited.
Yeah.
I think new places also help. I think having constantly getting new places are coming in. Because when you look at the dining scene in Armory, there's just not that many new restaurants. There are places that have come and have gone, but there's very few places that have been there less than 5 years.
Yeah.
You have Margarita's, LM Social,
Right. Tap House,
which is brand new.
Yeah.
Nobody's.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, I mean, it's places come and they just can't get the support, they can't get it figured out, and they have to close, and it's really sad. And so I think the more stuff that pops up, the better.
Yeah.
The more stuff that drives people downtown. So I think the general vibe is really important. And you also have to have a diversity. There's no need to have 15 pizza spots within 4 blocks when you don't have a French bistro, or you don't have, or you don't have a Thai restaurant or something like that. So you need that diversity. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point because it's a good question. I mean, I think people need to drink in the streets. If they turned Armory Square into a social district,
They did that 3 years ago. Two or 3 years ago. They had Michael John Haggerty, I think, was at the forefront of it. But when they first started, they did the parklets, downtown. So like you could, and he had a guy that was building them, and then you had to rent out those parking spots for however long you would have them up. But essentially, no. Jeff, do me a favor, slide over that way. Because that's going to pull focus. They had the parklets, like the New York City dining things, but they were tiny. It was like the size of like a car and a half, and you could fit you could cram like 4 tables onto them. Pasta Billy's had one. I think 3 Lives had one. Funkin' Waffles had one. Not too many people had them, but then they would shut Armory down throughout, I think it was Friday and Saturday. It's either Friday nights, it's either Fridays through Sunday or Fridays through Saturday. All road traffic was shut down in Armory from up where you are all the way down to, the end where, the Syracuse Suds is. And it was all walkable. There's no cars allowed down there whatsoever. And that was kind of cool for that summer.
Well, that's the crazy thing. I'll look at pictures. I'll see people.
Yeah.
I'll see friends that I've made here in the few years that I've lived here who show me videos of what Armory Square looked like on a Wednesday pre-COVID, and it's crazy, you know. So the potential's there
For sure.
You know, the culture and the dynamics were there, and we just kind of have to tap back into like how to get that back. But it's crazy to me to see some of these photos and videos from just a random midsummer Tuesday or Wednesday, and to just see the streets packed with people, you know, supporting their local watering holes, their local restaurants, and I think COVID did do damage on that. You know, I think there's probably a couple other reasons as well, but when John and I invested into Nobody's at the end of Walton, to our knowledge, there's never been a bar that far down on Walton Street. I mean, you had Wonder Bar kind of at the far end on the other side of the parking lot.
There was Daniel Jack's back in the day, and then Opus. I think it was called Opus. Daniel Jack's, and there was one before Daniel Jack's also. That was where Kasai was. So,
and we really, really wanted to like bookend Walton, you know, because we really want it's that investment into that space, into doing a wine bar there as opposed to anywhere else, was really because we believed in the potential for Armory Square to come back. And being on the downtown committee, a lot of people care.
You are on
about
the
bringing
downtown committee?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And a lot of people really care about bringing this area back. I mean, that's why we looked at a number of spaces for Touché. In various parts of town, and we ultimately we made the decision to invest that capital into Armory Square.
That's cool.
Again, because I think there's a lot of potential. But I'm sure Jeff probably has a much wiser answer to what makes a good dining
I don't know
scene.
if it's going to be wiser, but I don't think there's one decisive answer. I think there's very many variables because Syracuse is not a small city, and it's also not a very large city. But if you take a look at all of these other small town sets, or even you can look at villages for that matter, they have their own individual food scenes. And I think it's more or less the community aspect to it. I don't think restaurants need to compete with each other. Obviously, they do in some level because it's money, and there's only so much money in any given area. But I don't think it needs to be a race, or it needs to be this team or that team, or like don't go there, don't go here. That divisional aspect really breaks up a community. It really breaks up people's decisions to go to different places because that person doesn't like this one, or so on and so forth. But that's a big aspect to it. I also think whatever the business represents in itself, I think you need to kind of be proud of the product that you put out, because lots of people can open up any types of businesses that just want to have a business, or they just want to put out product but don't necessarily stand behind it. They just want the notoriety maybe sometimes, or it's just something they like, well, this is a goal I wanted to accomplish, and it's fun for a little bit, and then it's not fun, and then you can really see it in the avenues, whether it's their wait staff or their employees or the food that they put out for that matter. I think what drives a good food scene is just the community that it stands within. I mean, if your community can support lots of different divisional or diverse restaurants, and that's a fantastic food scene. And if your community can't support that many avenues, then you might have 3 or 4 really, really good ones, and it's still a good food scene. I don't think it's just like, oh, because you offer this or you offer that. I think it's such a dynamic answer that it kind of takes everyone to be a part of it to really make it good.
I think that's exciting about what things like, what Rich is trying to do is really bring in, a lot of really good food put together by a lot of people, paired with really great beverages. And like really showing that like, we can all come together and we can do something good for a good cause, but we can also just sort of, the camaraderie that it builds, and kind of, I think it really helps show, the community aspect of what downtown Syracuse is capable of. And it's there. I mean, it's so there,
Especially if you think about it, like you say Armory Square and Clinton Square and Hanover Square, but they're just
blocks away.
stones throw
Right.
away from each other, and on a map there is no difference. As
Right.
soon as you zoom out far enough, they all
Yeah.
it's all one big blob together anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's do you think when it comes to like the diversity of culture and diversity of the restaurants that like the city can sustain, if that is a low number, if that's like 2 or 3, do you think first of all, should it grow to like a dozen? And do you think that's the responsibility of the owner or the responsibility of like the people in the culture to be able to sustain it?
I mean, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, because there are so many small little hole in the wall spots. I think Salt City Market has done a great job of helping propel some of these smaller, entrepreneurs coming from different backgrounds. A lot of them first generation Americans. And putting them in a position of empowering them to like be able to put their food out to the market.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's a community aspect of support for that because, I have a master's degree in sociology, but it was political economics was my specialization area. I took, classes with, a lot of law students and, I completed most of my work for a PhD. And at the end of the day, trying to open a business in New York State was so complicated and very confusing. And I wanted to pull my hair out so much more than looking at like complex algorithms for economic data and everything like that. I was like, just the process of trying to like get permits and do everything right, do everything timely. And so to be somebody that doesn't have, the education or the capacity, to like read or write English at a native level or well-educated level, like I can only imagine how impossible it might feel to open up a business, especially in the city of Syracuse. Like you go to other websites or other cities, like Denver's a great example. I want to start a business. The first on the side of the page, they have the exact same web page, and they have click to see it in this language, and there's about 30 different languages listed.
Wow.
You don't see that in upstate New York or even really for New York State. And so, I think that we as a community can do a way better job providing resources and help. Not that the resources and help don't exist. But I think, for somebody who is just thinking about it and they just try to see what it would take to do it, it can be so self-defeating from second one that you just scratch the idea and put it in the back of your head. And I think that's really unfortunate. And so I think more than anything, there has to be a community. Bob, and I think Syracuse can withstand a lot more diversity. I think there's a need and demand for it. Like it's crazy. You can drive down Erie Boulevard and you can stop at a number of these like Asian and Korean restaurants, and like on a Monday night or Tuesday night, they're packed. They're full. And it's really, really cool to see. There used to be a ton of like these sort of like Croatian and Balkan grocery stores that try to do food, and then that all. I mean, they almost all of them went away. I think, except for Resnick Market over here in Eastwood post COVID. They still have the grocery store, but all the food's gone. But there's a huge sort of Balkan, Croatian, Bosnian population here. And so, I'm really, really big on providing more resources, and because it's hard. And it can be really self-defeating.
I've often thought, I mean, like I said, I look at our food scene, critically, and I'm looking forward to getting more out of the business of the restaurant industry and more into just kind of like the appreciation for the restaurant industry, and I'm kind of like pushing into that direction because being so involved in like the business of the industry has made, I've made myself critical, but being involved in the business side of things, has lent to me to become more critical of our industry specifically. And like you were saying, just like knowing like, oh, I don't fuck with that owner. I don't go over there because of this reason, whatever the case is. And so I almost hate it when I see new restaurants open. You're the exception. Because there are so many restaurants that I see that open up and do things so incorrectly. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I got started doing Eat Local New York. And I know I've told this story 1,000 times, but when I started off, when I moved back here 8 years ago, it was just like social media management for restaurants. And I met a woman who, talking to her, she was on her way out of business. She didn't know it yet, but somebody asked me to go and talk with her and see if I could give her advice on social media advertising to help her get customers in the door. And when I spoke to her, I was like, what's your story? How did you get started? Oh, I worked at a bank. I managed this branch for this bank. I made great money. I had health insurance. Everybody was happy and healthy. I used to love cooking for friends and family on the weekends when they would come over, and everybody told me I should follow my passion and open a restaurant. And that's great, but the only thing she knew how to do in the restaurant industry was make that one thing. And it was good, but that's all she knew how to do. She didn't know how to find a location, how to buy food properly, how to, how to make it last, how to hire people, how to advertise, how to market, how to set your menu, all these other things that are so important in the restaurant industry, or to own a successful restaurant, that she was out of business in 6 months, and then massive amounts of debt. And, and in my head, I'm like, all right, well, what resources are you now going to be sucking from the community for the next however many years or how much is your life going to suck over the next however many years while you are trying to pay off all of this debt that you have from this failed business? What if there was like some sort of a central, here's how to open a restaurant class or school? Like, listen, for 12 weeks, we're going to teach you everything you need to know. So, maybe we're going to go from 90% failure rate down to, 70% in the first year, whatever the case is.
It's, this is not an easy industry. It's not easy to, I didn't expect, right now, we're opening a restaurant, but right now I just own a glorified lemonade stand. That helps me get through the day. It's like, I own a lemonade stand. I sell adult lemonade.
I hope I didn't just scare the shit out of you.
No. The statistics are real. We know
the tagline. Yeah.
We know the statistics. But it's just one of those things that, like, you don't realize some of the struggles that you're going to have.
Yeah.
The time, I remember when I first opened up Nobody's, I worked 632 hours the first month. I regret keeping track.
Yeah.
But I did. I wrote it down every day, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
Not good for your mental health.
No.
But when you look at, even in other markets, when you look at Syracuse and you look at the most successful restaurants, the one that have been around forever, it's people who have experience in this industry.
For sure.
And that's what it takes. You can read. I've learned this more and more coming out of graduate school. I was like, you can read all the books in the world about how the business world works. That can give you a large leg up, but experience really does account for a lot. And, I think that's one of the things that should really excite people about Touché, is that we are filling the space with owner-operators, with staff, bartenders, bar managers, servers, floor managers, of people who care. This is their career. This is their passion. This has been their livelihood for a long time, and who have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And we just want to create something incredibly special for ourselves, but also for the community and for anyone who walks in those doors.
Yeah.
Like, our job at the end of the day is, regardless of how great or how shitty you feel when you walk in those doors, we want you to feel a little bit better. For that 40 minutes or hour and a half that you're in our care, you shouldn't have to worry about a care in the world. You should be able to put the phone down. You should be able to forget, about the court case you have to defend tomorrow. And our job is to just sort of just take you away from your life just for a little bit. And just really make you feel awesome with great food, wonderful service, really nice cocktails, good glasses of wine. And it's so much less about, the steps of service or what you do to people matters a lot. But kind of the forgotten part often is how you make people feel. And it's important to keep that in mind, because as an owner operator, you get so distracted by everything else that you also have to worry about, that sometimes you forget that really the reason that you exist every day is because people come in here and they feel good when they leave.
Yeah.
Or they feel better than when they walked in. And I think that's kind of one of the hidden recipes. It doesn't matter if you have the best food in the world.
Yeah.
That will only carry you so far. If you have the best food in the world, you have the capacity to change how people feel through that food and through service, then that's the recipe for success.
Yeah. I kind of, over the years, my perspective on food and restaurants, and especially like nicer ones, has changed a bit from, a debate I had with Cody Dedishu from Deefy over whether or not he's an artist or a craftsman. A chef making like incredible food, to where I would have viewed him as an artist. And then, maybe over the last year, I would have like said, okay, I can see a little bit of the craftsmanship in it, but I still think that they're an artist. And then looking at food scenes and looking at artistry from like, I had Stephen Page on the podcast, and I was asking him like, local music scene, why is it that some scenes in smaller towns just seem to really suck? And he was saying, as an artist, as a musician, you really have to get out of your home. You have to like go travel and experience new things and live a life to really be able to develop as an artist, or as a musician in his case. And I, taking all of these different things about, and then understanding like hospitality, like especially from like your world of things, and understanding like the level of, it's almost maybe like a dual mindset of like, yes, I want to be a master of my craft and know everything I can about this wine and the vineyard and the notes and, identifications and pairings. But at the same time, I also have to understand, like, I'm trying to be the most, give my guests the most wonderful experience and hospitality that they can. Or like what you just said, like they can come in and forget about life for a brief moment. It's challenging for me to wrap my head around a great restaurant chef or a great food scene is really something that encompasses all of those things together at the same time. And they can be sort of like fighting against each other, I think, to a certain extent, of like trying to like be a craftsman and understand that like, okay, I'm going to butcher the animal in this capacity, but then my artistry is going to come into how I transform that food into something that's incredibly delicious and appealing to the eye and the taste buds on the plate for the customer. And I'm going to know every detail of the wine and what pairs with it, while also trying to step away and think to myself, I need to be giving them the best experience possible while they're here. It's like, it's all of these things that really, I don't know, to me, it's like I can, for my own brain, I could focus on one of those things to try and wrap my head around all of them at the same time and then present this product to the customer is very difficult.
I struggle with that question that you just mentioned, the artistry or the craftsman. And I think over the course of history, especially with the introduction of like the Food Network and like the visual aspect, the instantaneous aspect of like Instagram and taking pictures of food, I think people forget it is just food, right? Like it does take a skill. It is a skill set. Yeah. And yes, like you can take the craftsman part of it, and like you're taking and transforming something into something else, and you're using the artistry to make it look pretty. Mm-hmm. But I know there's numerous high caliber chefs out there who have been doing it for decades upon decades upon decades, and they get asked this question all the time, and they say, I all say the same thing: it's not art, it's food, because it's still it's a service provided to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So we can get into all those fine details about the artistry and the craftsmanship and this and this and this, but at the end of the day, it is literally we are providing a service to people that you are paying for. So it's not really a trying to pigeonhole or trying to compartmentalize all of the steps in all of this, like the taking of the animal and breaking it down and then turning it into dishes and then knowing every nuance and aspect to it seems like a big thing. But if you go to a body shop, a mechanic, and you're like, hey, fix my car for me, it's the same exact thing. it's a car.
Yeah.
So you are paying someone an X amount of dollars to take a product and turn it into something else to make you satisfied for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the water really starts to get muddy in this aspect. And I'm not saying you can't approach food
Right.
that way, because obviously it's gorgeous and it's beautiful, and you can have as many interpretations of food as you would like, and the history. And, I look at a dish completely different that you would might, or you would might, and it means something you differently.
Yeah.
But when you strip all that stuff away, you're paying me to cook food because you want to sit down and enjoy the food in a setting that is not your home.
Yeah.
And
So-
we're providing a service to make that happen for you.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to try everything we possibly can to make sure a customer or consumer or whatever it might be to be satisfied, because that's our job. That's our business, is to offer a service to you. And that's where it kind of gets a little.
So do you
It's
view
a bit
it
more.
Do you view it more as like a craft and less of an art? And what you do specifically?
Well, I can tell you I'm a terrible artist. I can't draw. I can't sing. I'm pretty sure if you gave me a cello, I would not remember how to play it, despite playing it for many years. I think, and I'm going to butcher this, no pun intended, that someone put this in a phrase that made sense to me, that like art is abstract and it's made for interpretation. It's designed, like when someone paints something and they want to have a visceral reaction for it, and that visceral reaction is up there on the wall forever, or until someone takes it down or something happens to it, or degrades, whatever. But when you make a plate of food, I'm going to make it look good because it needs to be, because you eat with your eyes first, but I also need you to eat it.
Yeah.
I need it to be something that is functional to you and functional to me, because I put effort into it. The wine grower puts effort in it. All of these people put so much effort into it.
Yeah.
And it's the longer we focus on the idea that this is an artist's rendition, or like a painting of something, that all you do is want to stare at it, well, then I have not done my job. Like it should be eaten.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it can be put into terms of this or that.
Yeah.
I think there is an artistry to it. There is also a craft to it, because it is a skill that's learned, and you learn from other people or you teach yourself.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's just one or the other. I think it's a culmination.
Yeah.
But again, if you strip it down, it's food. Like you're supposed to eat it.
Yeah.
And you can eat terrible food.
Right.
Like terrible tasting food. Is it still going to do its job? Yes. Like you need protein, you need nourishment, you need to consume something to keep living. Can it be better, and can it look good along the way, and can it hit all those nuanced moments of nostalgia or visual memories or all that other stuff that might be associated with it? Yes.
Yeah.
And could you push for that? Yeah, of course. But I don't think it's too hard of an answer to be like, no, it's this or that.
And I've seen my fair share of chefs, especially in like fine dining restaurants, looking out into the dining room, getting absolutely furious that a plate of hot food is getting cold.
Sure.
While everyone's there taking photos of it, posting it on Instagram in the moment, and they're like, "Would you just eat my fucking food, please?"
I agree. I think it's like similar to like going to a concert and just like holding your phone up the whole time so you can video every song. Like I went to, which I would have done in the past, going to see my favorite band, but I went to a concert earlier this year, and I was like, I am not bringing my phone out this entire show. Like I'm just going to sit here and enjoy the songs and remember it, and that's it.
You probably had a better time.
I did. Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent I did. But then at the same time, like the videos that I took 2 years ago at a Counting Crows concert, I've never looked at since, I don't think I ever even posted them. They just sit on my phone and come with me from every phone that I upgrade to. But then I will say, like, after the show, I was thinking to myself, man, I do kind of wish I had a picture of that. And so I agree with that to an extent. It's one of the reasons I haven't made video content for Eat Local New York in like the last 2 years about nice restaurants, because I feel like it's one thing for me to go get a cheeseburger and then step outside of that restaurant on the sidewalk and be like, this cheeseburger is delicious and here's why. it's a completely different thing for me to do that at Eden, and not that there are like, Instagrammers or restaurant promoters or content creators that do that and do that well at nicer restaurants, and I'm sure drive a lot of business to them. But I just think it's like it's so much more difficult to like create a 60-second clip about why the Mona Lisa is important to me, or whatever the case is. And so I agree that like food is in like its greatest form, or even maybe its simplest form. It can be all of those things. It can be craft and art. It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. And I do think that it can vary depending on the person who's making it and the person who's enjoying it, and I'm sure that if you sit down and think of a dish and think of like, okay, here's this classic French dish that I'm going to make that's going to be on the menu. Here's where we're going to source the animal. Here's how I'm going to break it down. Here's how I'm going to prepare it. Here's how I'm going to plate it. Here's how I'm going to present to the customer. You doing all of those things is a form of both artistry and craftsmanship versus if you just gave me a list of instructions and said, here's a picture of how it's supposed to look. Here's all the ingredients. Do it in exactly this form. That's far more, craftsmanship than it is artistry, right? Because I'm just copying everything that you told me to do.
And I think a point that, I want to make, too, especially about Touché is I don't know if we've come out and like have explicitly said it, but like, I don't think we're not really positioning Touché to be like a fine dining restaurant. Per se, we'll have high-end, wine dinners, events like that. You can come in and you'll be able to do things like have caviar, have really, really nice premium cuts of meat. You can have, we'll give you the opportunity, we'll have those moments of where, this can be your, once in a lifetime or your once a year anniversary dinner. But at the end of the day, we're a neighborhood bistro. Our bread and butter, what we want is we want people to feel comfortable, like they're paying a fair price and getting a really good experience coming in after work on a Tuesday, Wednesday every week to have, some steak frites or cassoulet or something.
There will be a burger on there. It's almost a necessity that I have a burger on there because it kind of falls with everything else here. But
I think one of you were telling me about it. It's gonna be like an organ meat blend burger, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be whatever I want. I mean, it can be whatever I want it to be at the end of the day.
Based on your artist's interpretation of what a burger is.
Or, I mean, I don't really know if you're going to be able to notice the difference anyway. But and again, that's what I was touching base with. Like, it is just food. And like, I think half the time when I look at, a half a cow or whatever, or you look at a steak, or there's a reason why at the Texas Roadhouse you get to pick your steaks because half of it is like, I don't really need to do a whole lot to make a steak. Be a steak. It looks gorgeous on its own. The cow did its job. The farmer did its job to make an excellent product. Like, who am I to try to turn it into something else? Like, we can make beautiful burgers with all of these. I mean, all I'm doing is taking this really good product and blending it together and then cooking it in a way that it preserves what it is. And, is that fine dining? I guess it could be.
The food's going to be fine.
But at the same time, it's just a burger. Or it's going to be a really good burger that has like, a really nice artisan roll or really nice pickles or a really nice sauce to it or a really nice product. That could be fine dining, or or it's just a burger. It's really how you interpret that. But I mean, I can at least guarantee on my aspect that I'm going to put all the effort that I can into it to make it good. Because I'm going to do everyone else justice leading up to that point.
So I feel like the conversation is leading me to ask this next question. How do you feel about like the world of, video, photo, entertainment around food in restaurants? And I know that's a broad spectrum from, I don't know, Anthony Bourdain, let's say, and, maybe people like Brad Leone, to, all the way down to, the Food Network and BuzzFeed. But how do you all feel about that?
I think the perfect example of this is the TV show Somebody Feed Phil.
I don't know if I know that.
So it's Phil Rosenthal, the creator.
Oh,
of
Somebody
Everyone
Feed Phil. Yeah.
I think that is probably the perfect example of like what good food television is. Like because again, food is a staple. It's not a commodity. It's something that everyone needs. And sometimes it is viewed as a commodity, and sometimes it's viewed as just like we need to make the cheapest thing possible to get people fed. And I get that. There is a conversation to be had there.
Right.
But there's so much, food can be political, food can be environmental, food can be a life or death scenario, food can have a story, food can have all these things. It literally, I mean, the term breaking bread with somebody is having a conversation over food. And I think the visual aspect, the media aspect of food, there is a time and a place for it. Should you hold up your entire meal because you want to take pictures and you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's your money. So, I mean, it's one thing to be like, let this whole meal go cold.
Yeah.
And then be like, I'm sending it back because it's cold now and I'm going to complain about it and I should get it for free. That's one thing. But if you would like to take your time and you want to savor it, and if you want to take pictures to remember it or talk about it or have a moment with it, by all means. Do I think there is some negativity that stems from it? Like, Hell's Kitchen is 100% entertainment value. I think Gordon Ramsay has blatantly come out and been like, this is not who I am on a daily, like this is just me because I'm asked to personify this moment of my life. And it's an entertainment, and some people are like, oh, I could do that. Or some people can look at I think there was a series on the Food Network that focused on like these 3 restaurants out in Lake George. It was like summer season or something like that. And it was like an in-depth dramatized version of their lives that they went through all 3 restaurants. And it's like, I get that, but why? Yeah. Why would I want to watch another restaurant owner or struggle on a day? Like, why do I want to watch it? Like, I get it. To like some people, like I'll freely admit, I'm a sucker for the Real Housewives on Bravo. Like, it is so entertaining because it seems so unbelievable. But these are these people's lives, and they do some really messed up things to each other. Could that be detrimental to food? Obviously. And I think it gets a weird perspective of a newer generation of people who want to learn how to cook, or they want to do this as a career, and then they go to culinary school and they're like, oh, I'm going to immediately walk into a space and be like, I'm going to be the Food Network's next food star. Right. Excuse me, or open a restaurant there. They think they're a chef and they want to skip all these aspects because they saw it on TV and it was so easy. Or the winners of Hell's Kitchen get a $250,000 salary or something like that, without realizing this is a job interview. Yeah, and you're like, you are signing a contract, and like you have to do that. So I guess it's just like anything else. It has, in moderation, it's fantastic. Oversaturated, it doesn't really do anyone any good, other than it's just pure entertainment at that point. Yeah,
it's interesting.
I mean, you can go to my personal Instagram, and I'll be the first to say it's mostly food photos. Of food that I have not made, but people have made in restaurants for me, and
for sure.
So I am definitely one of those picture takers.
I don't take pictures anymore when I go out to eat. I stopped that like 2 years ago, and part of it was just because like the world of content changed. If I wanted to try and grow the business, I needed to start making more videos, and I'm not going to be able to sit down and make an accurate and honest video about a restaurant while I'm like, my wife's sitting there waiting for me to, finish so she can eat. Right. So I just stopped doing it. I stopped bringing cameras and lights with me to restaurants. Like, if I go out to eat, I go out to eat. If I go to make content, I go to make content. It's just 2 very different things for me nowadays. And honestly, having like an almost 2-year-old going out to eat just to go out to eat just doesn't happen anymore, unless I'm like running through a drive-through on my way out of town, or, running upstairs to OIP or something. It's just it's so infrequent that happens. But I do often wonder, like, I don't know, I think we live in that world of content. I do think that there's, even though like the CEO of Instagram is always saying like, we don't have enough video content to meet the need of content that people want to watch. I would say, I think we have too many restaurants in general, and I think we have too many restaurant content creators in general, Too many people, like I'm guilty of that just copy something because it's like, oh, they got views. Maybe this will get views if I make the exact same video on my page,
Well, I think it's, I think you said it yesterday on Instagram, something about an actual, that you weren't a food critic, but but the written word sometimes is a lot more powerful than, and you can look at this even for YouTube, because obviously they're the biggest video content creator on the internet, and you can look at their history of their algorithm of like what content creators were supposed to be doing. Like before it was like any length video. They're like, well, 10 minutes is like the perfect video. And now it's like it should be no more than like 2 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And I think the further you get away with that, or the ebb and flow of that, and then you just lose like what was the purpose of any of this to begin with? But I think sometimes the written word and an in-depth way of describing things is so much meaningful and more articulate that people will hang on to that a little more than just someone being like, here's my 30-second clip, or here's my 3 pictures of the plate as I got it, here's me eating half of it, and here's my empty plate. Like that's not really content. It's just
I mean, it's hard because it's like media studies keep on coming out, and this was stuff that in graduate school we engaged with a lot, and it was basically because being a political sociologist, it was always like, how are people consuming the news and the media? And it's like all these studies were coming out and being like, you're seeing news stories get shorter and shorter and shorter because people's attention span to be engaged before they get bored and to move on has just continuously gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Yeah. So to really kind of like advocate for how cool something is in like 5-10 seconds, it's so hard. I mean, the people who can figure out how to do that, those people are really gifted and talented, but it's just like, I'm long-winded as fuck. Like I was like, I can convince you about how cool something is, but it's hard for me to do it in like 5 seconds.
I think you have probably the 2 most long-winded people on your show right now, because I too can stand on a podium and talk for hours.
And we care a lot. We have a lot to say, but it's just like, to get it out in like the 5 or 10 second clip is hard. Like, people ask us all the time, like, what's Touché? And I'm like,
well, the short answer or the long answer?
And the short answer is no less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like one of the most popular podcasts in the country and the world is Joe Rogan. His episodes are 2.5 and 3 hours, and there is an argument for YouTube content starting to shift where the popular stuff is becoming longer form right now. Where like if you look at like even vlogging. If you look back in the day, like Casey Neistat, like his vlogs were, 5 to 10 minutes in length, and they were like he put out daily vlogs for like 800 days or however many days, how many years in a row. Every day there was a vlog, and it was incredibly structured. There was like a 3-act structure to all of his vlogs, and incredible scenes and cinematography in there, and wildly popular. But if you look at the vlog today that is one of the most popular on YouTube, it's Sam Selleck, who's like this massive bodybuilder, and his vlogs are like there's a GoPro on the end of his shopping cart as he's in the grocery store walking through the aisles talking about what he's buying for groceries, and they're like 45 minutes long, single shot. He's not like hiding GoPros behind like the box of cereal. It just clipped to the end of his shopping cart. And granted, he is like a Liver King looking type of a person, this like monster of a human being. But it's just interesting that like his stuff is working really well. I agree with written word, because like you go into most, especially older restaurants from like the early 2000s or the 90s, what is often printed in a plaque on their wall, an article that was written about them, not an Instagram video. It's not like it's a screenshot of, one of my videos of saying like this restaurant was delicious, right? It's like the written word. And yeah, when it comes to like, being critical of restaurants, or being a food critic, I mean, I think it's important to any food scene that's trying to be, serious, is to have a proper food critic, someone who knows what they're talking about thoroughly when it comes to food, restaurant industry, food history, regional history, all of those sorts of things. and I don't think an Instagrammer should be critical of food. You know, like I know Keith Lee is a massive presence online, and I would, you know, probably shoot either one of you right now to have half of his following and his money. But having said that, I don't think I'm going to go out of my way because I'm going to be like, oh, Keith Lee said it was amazing, or I'm not going to go there because Keith Lee said it sucked. As a matter of fact, like you mentioned margaritas, and like some of the busiest times that they've ever had, and they're pretty busy all the time. Some of the busiest times of the restaurant's history is when they were getting beat up the most on where Syracuse eats, you know, so... You know, there's something to be said nowadays. Even like the more critical, you know, the worse restaurants appear, people are like, oh, let's go see how bad it is. You know.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that about photography and whatnot, and I'm gonna say this lightly because I see I'm on where Syracuse eats because I'm interested to see, I guess, the court of public opinion sometimes. Yeah. But constantly I see, well, I didn't take a picture.
Yeah.
Or I didn't take a picture. Or I didn't take a picture. And then the wealth of comments are like, well, that's one of the rules is to take a picture of your food. And like this guy or person, you know, has commented, well, there's no phones at the table. Like we just go because we want to sit and eat. Mm-hmm. And like there's no reason for me to take a picture of the food. Yeah. Like if you want to see it, then just go to the restaurant. Like go and figure it out for yourself. And there is the downside of like, oh, how bad could it really be? Let's go there and find out. And then you give a restaurant a chance sometimes, or a food place a chance sometimes. You might walk away and be like, I have no idea what they were talking about. Yeah. That was like delicious, and I'm going to come back again and again and again. Because let's be for real, everyone has a bad day.
For sure.
And, you know, sometimes that cascades into a split second. Like you could be the 1% of a person going to an establishment that happens to get that, because no one is perfect and not everything runs perfectly. It's not run by robots. It's not designed to be that. I mean, you want it to be that way as much as possible.
Right.
I want everyone to get the same experience, pleasant experience every single time. But, you know, stress changes. Like
I'll be the first one to vouch for that. I mean, it's just it's been hard. You know, I mean, and nobody's, you know, I'm usually the only one there most of the time. You know, and I'll put in a full 8-hour day before I open up to the public for 8 hours. And that 8 hours might turn to being open to the public for 10 hours. And I have a couple hours at the end, close up, decompress, go home and sleep. And, you know, it adds up. I've definitely had bad days, you know, and I hate that for the guests. I absolutely hate that for the guests.
Yeah.
You know, and you just want everyone to have that great experience. You know, you want it. I want it. That's really, I mean, I know the wine tastes like what it's supposed to taste like. Yeah. You know, so the rest of your experience is all based on how we treat you. You know, it's so important, you know, but, you know, people mess up, they have bad days, you know, it doesn't justify it. You know, I still want that person. I still want to make it right for those people. But, you know, it's hard because they are coming in, they are paying for an experience. Yeah. And, you know, in the service, especially, you know, my philosophy is a huge part of that. You know, that's one of the things. It's like this industry takes a toll on you mentally, physically. And we don't talk about that enough. I mean, thankfully, post-COVID, a number of organizations started popping up all across the country, you know, talking about like mental health support for like restaurant workers, hospitality workers, you know, financial resources, even especially during COVID. Yeah. And it's important. This industry is toxic. It's hard. Yeah. You know, our goal is to take care of people. And we sometimes I think we get stuck in the habits of not taking care of ourselves. For sure. And giving everything to others. And at the end of the day, that's only going to ultimately, at some point in time, hurt the guest experience. Yeah. You know, and I think there definitely should be a little more conversation about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time. I could sit here and talk for another hour. Unfortunately, I booked myself too close today, so I got to pull. But hey, listen, thank you so much. Yeah, of course. People can find out about Touché. I know it's opening soon. There's no official date. I know that, but the Instagram, the website.
Instagram's up. Touché _SYR. Okay. If you just type in Touché, TOUCHE on Instagram, you'll find it.
I'll put links in the show notes and everything.
And it's They'll be open. We're still doing slinging pierogies.
Nice.
Nobody's on Thursdays. That's not going to stop. And we'll be open soon.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.